And I can do it. Okay. You can just step in wherever you want to. Okay. So, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Chad Bruckman, and I work with the Tennessee Department of Health, like Dr. Bates indicated, and been there 4 years in public health and emergency preparedness. And I'm going to talk a lot about our programs and talk about public health in our region and our county health departments and our regional office and all the different roles that we have. My background is in law enforcement, fire service. Started in the fire service 25 years ago now, been a long time. Worked as a police officer on the road for about 2 years, and then worked for emergency management here in Washington County for 5 years, and 4 years here with emergency preparedness. So we have a really good program, really good staff. We have a good relationship with ETSU as a whole, but with the College of Public Health and College of Medicine, College of Pharmacy, and we have a lot of partners in our program. So I'll kind of talk about that too. So just a brief background in public health emergency preparedness. It was developed after 9/11, 2002, 2003. Money was really flowing after that. Probably some of you may not be old enough to remember, or probably were pretty young then at that point, but I remember exactly where I was that day. I was at work, fire department, when the planes hit, actually getting off work, so it was a tough day. And so after that, Homeland Security was developed a couple of years after that, about a year after that, and we started getting a lot of Homeland Security funding for terrorism prevention, and all the different agencies kind of come together with Department of Homeland Security and FEMA and all that kind of ramped up for terrorism there, and of course we still see it today. The public health part of it started around 2003, and it began with grant funding through the CDC, or Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and it began as a program to monitor the possibility of the use of weaponized smallpox. We all know that smallpox is eradicated in the world. However, it is in laboratories, probably in other places in the world where terrorists have it. Well, we know they do, but we just hope they never use it. And I'm sure that's in the United States and places too, and some labs around. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it's around. So we were at that time. I was in the fire service and law enforcement at the time, but public health's mission was to look at the vulnerability that our community had as a whole, as a nation, and then as a state, and to look at programs that can help with that. And we'll talk some more about some of the things that we do with point of dispensing for violent terrorism and things like that. Probably 4 or 5 years ago now, probably before I started, we kind of shifted. We still do bioterrorism planning. That's pretty much like 75% of what we do. We do a lot of planning and a lot of exercising, a lot of training and things like that. A lot of what if, a lot of that type of thing. But now we do respond. We respond to all hazards events. So it could be any type of natural disaster, man-made, chemical, hazardous material, radiation, things like that. And I'll show you some examples of that. Because any disaster that we have does have some type of public health implication. If you can think of what happens in a disaster as far as physically, environmentally, and even psychological or emotionally, that there is always an impact on someone's health somehow. And not that we go out and specifically deal with that part of it, but we do consult with local government on if there's standing water from a flood that has sewage infestation, mosquito infestation, contamination of vegetable gardens, contamination of animals and facilities and restaurants and our water system and things like that. We kind of help out with that. So as I go throughout this, if you have any questions, please stop. I really would like to have questions. I don't like to stand up here and talking the whole time, even though I can probably talk longer than you want me to about our program and about what we do, because I'm very passionate about it. But please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and ask. So our program, we have a really good team. Our program is led by Dr. Kursky. He's an instructor here, or an adjunct instructor. Some of you may know him, some of you may not, and you probably will have a class with him before your career here is done in the College of Public Health. He's our regional medical director. He's also over the communicable disease and emergency preparedness program. he provides the overall direction for us, and I'm actually a direct report under him. And then he has we have a CDS, or communicable disease nurse, that deals with the TB and sexual transmitted disease, AIDS, hepatitis, all the different diseases that are out there that we have to deal with and that we do have in our area. We also are starting to do a lot of work with opioid prevention, quite a bit of the trying to get the naloxone out into the community, not only for drug users that to have it. Hopefully, we hope we don't encourage them to keep doing drugs just because they have an antidote, but we do have that out there for those folks. But we are really focusing on our first responders, law enforcement, fire service, and EMS, who go out and calls to where people have overdosed and maybe with fentanyl-laced marijuana or heroin or just fentanyl itself. It's pretty dangerous. So he has a lot of different hats he wears. He's very knowledgeable. He was in the U.S. Public Health Service, so if that's something you're interested in, he'd be a good one to talk to. We have quite a few people embedded in Nashville Central Office that work through the CDC or U.S. Public Health Service assignees. So he's very knowledgeable, and I hope you get to hear. Sometimes he does lectures here at school, and he does a couple classes too. We have a nurse consultant. Her name is Melissa Taylor. She's an RN. She's been with us for 7 or 8 years now, and her main job is to prepare and plan for bioterrorism through our point dispensing program, and I'll explain more about that here. Of course, Kathleen's with us today. Kathleen graduated with a degree in epidemiology, or master's degree in epidemiology, and she interned with Sullivan County Health Department in emergency preparedness, and then after graduation, we had an opening for Medical Reserve Corps coordinator, and she's going to talk more about that here towards the end, because we're trying to recruit college students that will that could benefit from this. Both sides can benefit. We can benefit. You can benefit from this collaboration. Tony Wright, he's our regional hospital coordinator, and that program is called Hospital Preparedness Program, and I'll talk more about that. So we have 2 programs in public health that are 100% grant funded, and we're really dependent on government federal funding. Is the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program, and then the Hospital Preparedness Program. The Hospital Preparedness Program is very attuned to our community in the way of healthcare coalitions. So we have a very large healthcare coalition. We all know that both systems are merging, or in the process of merging. But right now, we provide oversight for all of the Wilmot and Mountain States facilities in Northeast Tennessee, and we also have partners in Southwest Virginia, because Wilmot and Mountain States both reach into Southwest Virginia too. So we work very close with our Southwest Virginia and public health emergency preparedness folks. And then Dr. Robbins is our epidemiologist. She's on staff full time, and she stays very busy because we always have things going on. So I always tell people, it's kind of like Men in Black. If you've ever seen Men in Black with the aliens, there's always a food outbreak. There's always some outbreak, some type of norovirus outbreak somewhere in either a food establishment or a long-term care facility. There's always some type of disease outbreak going on somewhere. So you just don't know about it because it's not something we advertise. It's not real, interesting to talk about, especially when you go to a restaurant and one of the things that you have eating good food. So that's what's there. All right, so this is our region. We have 7 public health regions. So we have Northeast region, which is what we're in. We have East region, we have Southeast region, Upper Cumberland, Mid Cumberland, South Central, and West. And then we have what we call metro partners, and the gray, Sullivan County, is a metro. They receive the same funding from the state that all the other regions get or receive, but they take care of just Sullivan County. So we have Sullivan Metro, you have Knox County Metro, you have Hamilton, Chattanooga Metro, Davidson Metro, which is Nashville, Jackson, Madison, Shelby, which is Memphis. And so they kind of act as their own little health, well, they are their own health department, but they don't necessarily answer to the state. We do collaborate with them. The way our regional office works in our regions, is the regional office, which is located here in Johnson City. It's on the hill right here behind the railroad tracks. We provide oversight for programmatic issues for the county health department. So we have program managers in public health emergency preparedness, hospital preparedness, WIC, family planning. We have, of course, communicable diseases, TB program, hepatitis monitoring. We have to provide health education, death certificates, birth certificates, you name it, we do a bunch. So the regional office here in the regional offices in the state, we all provide oversight and help support the county health departments that we have in our region. So we have 7 counties that we support with 8 health departments. Hawkins County's got one in Rogersville and Churchill. Hancock's is in Sneedville. Green's health department's in Greenville. Of course, Washington County is over on Princeton Road. Unicoi is near the high school. Unicoi. Carter is in Elizabethton, near downtown, and then Johnson's in Mountain City. So that's we got a really huge area, and believe it or not, I can drive to Knoxville probably faster than I can get to Hancock County. It's a long ways if you've never been to Sneeville. It's about a 2-hour drive. So, and it's about an hour and a half drive to Mountain City. So we have a big area that we provide service for, and huge responsibility because we have a lot of things going on. We have a very safe community that we live in here in Northeast Tennessee, but we have a lot of the same hazards that other places in the United States have, and we'll kind of talk about that. We have a very good working relationship with our Southwest Virginia partners. We have a coalition called MEFEC, it's called Mountain Empire Public Health Emergency Coordination Council, and we collaborate with Kentucky, Southwest Virginia, and then our other regions that are west of us, and some of those regions that are west of us collaborate with the adjoining states. North Carolina is kind of a odd system. We're more of a centralized, what we call centralized public health system here, to where we have the regional office that provides program oversight for the county health departments, and we do a lot of auditing and a lot of meetings and follow-up type stuff in the counties, and we work very close. However, you get in places like North Carolina, Florida is another state where they call home rule, so they kind of work with the state, but they kind of do their own thing. And we have a huge gap there that I still have not been able to overcome, and I've tried to get meetings with folks, and I still can't get the person I need to meet with. So it's something that we're working towards. And as a state, we do respond in North Carolina, and I'll talk about that. We will respond anywhere in the southeast for disasters, and we have deployed to North Carolina in the past to help out the state. But we don't have a very good working relationship. Not to say that's not. It's been not good because we don't have communication. I guess it's not because we've done something wrong. They've done something wrong. We just can't get that link, and it's kind of difficult. But if you stay in the business long enough and do different things, you'll understand why it's hard. So that's kind of our jurisdiction and what we look at on a daily basis. We collaborate. We have interstate collaboration or in cooperation with all of our FEMA Region 4 states. So that's Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina, Kentucky, Mississippi, and we also do deploy in other territories. Right now, we have some nurses in St. Croix, and we might have some people in Puerto Rico still. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but we do prepare for and respond to all hazardous disasters. And then we also will respond via EMAC agreement, which is Emergency Mutual Aid Compact agreement, to other states, partner states. So I've been to Kentucky on deployments. Of course, I've been in the state on deployments. Been to Florida. We had people that went to Texas for Hurricane Harvey. We've had people that went to Katrina. We've had people that have been everywhere. So we receive what an EMAC agreement is. It's basically a request from another state for us to provide services, and usually it's in the way of a nurse strike team, ambulance strike team, incident management team. Could be environmental health. Could be epidemiologists to come out and look at data and things like that. But we do respond quite often, and I'm going to show some pictures of some of our recent responses. So again, we do work at the state level. We have a very good relationship with all of our other partners at the state level. Again, this is Dr. Kursky. This is his contact information. If you ever have any questions, feel free to call, email him. He's always willing to talk to, especially students, about questions you might have about something you've had a question here at school. He likes to watch birds, so if you're a bird watcher, he can do that. He likes to go and jump in the creeks and get them little, I call them hellbenders, they're little lizards, so if you like to do that, whatever. He's a very interesting person, so give him a call. There's my contact information. Again, please call me if you ever have any questions. When you get towards the end of your college education, you want to do an internship, we'd love to for you to get a hold of whoever here takes care of that. We have Katie Ken that we work through, and she sets up interviews. But if you ever need anything from me, there's all my information. Please give me a call. So again, I talked a little bit about all hazard planning response. So again, when the program first started, we were kind of in a silo where we're just looking at bioterrorism, but now we really work with our local EMA, state level EMA, to plan for all hazards, disasters. So that's in our area, we've seen just about everything. We are susceptible to earthquakes, flooding, tornadoes, storms, winter storms, high wind, wildfires. We have radioactive, a lot of radiation that's transported on the interstates and our roads. We also have some fixed site facilities like nuclear fuels, air jet ordnance. Of course, we have some fixed site large chemical manufacturers like Eastman, and there's some other ones around in Johnson City. So we do have a pretty large footprint for chemical disasters and for natural disasters. We see a lot of flooding, and we see a lot of the high winds and a lot of the snow, winter storms, when we do have those, and they're very serious in most cases. So kind of going into what we all have worked for most of our lives, as far as in our career. Many of the people here in this picture have worked in public health exclusively for their whole career. This is the incident management team that I worked with in Florida for about 10 days while we were there. We're actually standing in Homestead at their town hall. If you remember Hurricane Andrew, well, you probably don't, because you probably are not old enough to remember that. 1992 Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida and totally wiped out Homestead. And as you see now, it's rebuilt. It's really a really pretty town. The building that we were standing on the balcony of was rebuilt. It was destroyed, but it was rebuilt to withstand a Category 5 hurricane. And most of their buildings were rebuilt to that level. Whereas in parts of our state and parts of Tornado Alley in the Midwest and even Dixie Alley in Western Tennessee, a lot of the buildings have now built to withstand a Fast 5 tornado or EF5 tornado. So just briefly, just kind of give you an idea. And the reason I'm doing this is because I know you all, again, this is your first semester, right? Or first semester, and you're wondering what am I going to do with my life after college. This fella here used to work for Tennessee Emergency Management, and he's a radiation guru. I'm not really sure exactly what his educational background is, but Sean is a guru in radiation. He worked as the radiation program manager for TEMA. Christy Langford was a regional hospital coordinator. I think she's been in public health a long time. Barry back here, he worked for public health, but he was assistance administrator for years and years and years and moved into public health. Jack Cochran in the East Region, he worked as a paramedic for Jefferson County, was their EMA director for many years, and then later on in life come over to our side. Not real sure what Sabrina did before us, but of course I worked in law enforcement, fire, and these gentlemen here, fire service. Actually, this guy comes from California. He works on a lot of logistics type stuff, so a lot of moving of stuff. Very good. Peter's very good. These two guys here both worked in EMS in previous lives, emergency management. So now there's a lot of options and a lot of different career paths, and we all kind of ended up here. And so we kind of represents a lot of different areas of expertise and different things about that. So kind of a funny story, and I didn't think it was funny at the time, but and I'll show some pictures here. When you go on deployment, you don't really know how your sleeping arrangements are going to be, or what you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep. I ended up sleeping with this man for about 5 days in the same bed. That's because we didn't have anywhere else to sleep, and he's very hairy, and So it was really bad. It's like having walking in and having my Labrador in my. And I rolled over one night and thought it was my wife, and it was him. You know? Tough story. So we had fun. You know, you always come back. So this is our 40-person nurse strike team that went to Florida also. So that was a picture of Homestead that I was showing you, but we ended up in Miami-Dade, and we were supporting a functional needs shelter. And when I say functional needs, everybody in the shelter should have been in a hospital. They were that bad. This team went to Naples. All 40 nurses went to Naples. All 40 nurses are from Tennessee. We have a huge nursing staff because one of the things that we provide in our county health departments is primary care. And that's for people that don't have insurance or they're underinsured or not able to be insured. So we fill in the gap for those that need health care. So believe it or not, even though we have, there is the laws about having insurance and that people still can't afford it and they need health care. So we provide that. We have doctors, we have APNs or nurse practitioners that work for us. We have RNs, LPNs, you name it. We've got dentists, we've got dental assistants. We provide all those services to people in the community that need it. So they went to Naples and they did a tremendous job. Their conditions were very horrible. I think they walked into about a 500-person shelter down there. And again, when I say it was a functional needs shelter, all 500 people should have been in a hospital or a nursing home somewhere. They ended up in a shelter. So this is some pictures from our deployment to Florida, and I always add these things as they happen to the presentation. But you all probably saw the pictures and the video on TV about the fuel shortages and the food shortages and people being mean to each other. And believe me, it all happened. It all was true. I seen everything firsthand. It was absolutely horrible. It was like going into a third world country for 10 days. People just. It's just one of those, our society, I don't understand it, but it's just one of those things. We ended up sleeping in 3 or 4 different places. We ended up in a warehouse. So this is the first place we ended up, first couple nights we was there. We ended up in this hallway sleeping, and we ended up in a conference room for a few days in some big performing arts center. So we really didn't know from going from place to place where we were gonna eat or sleep. We just knew we were going, we started out in Tallahassee. We knew we had to go to Jacksonville. When we got there, we had to kind of make the best of it. When we left Jacksonville, we ended up in, this is a picture in Marathon Key where the hurricane actually, wall hit. So we actually drove the whole eastern part of the state from Tallahassee all the way down to the Keys and ended up back in Miami-Dade. So we experienced fuel shortages. As you can see, we ran out of fuel quite often in our trucks. We had to carry hundreds of gallons of spare fuel with us, and we'd have to stop along the interstate, and that's me and Jack and Sabrina, me filling the truck up for probably the 2nd or 3rd time. We were going to Jacksonville. In that picture, it was raining. The hurricane was actually coming towards us, so we were trying to get away from it, going from Tallahassee to Jacksonville when we ran out of fuel. So we would use our gas cans, we'd find a gas station, we'd fight to get gas, we'd have to go up and talk to the managers, and thank goodness they would let us get ahead of everybody, and then we could get our fuel back and then go down the road again, run out, go up again, and keep it going. So we had a good time, believe it or not. I learned a lot from this deployment, and I'll go again in a heartbeat, but our mission basically for the Hurricane Irma was to support emergency operations centers using the incident management system, and to support functional needs shelters in Florida, which had hundreds of folks that were very frail. They were elderly, they had a lot of medical problems, mobility problems, psychological problems. We had some people that committed suicide in some of our shelters. We had people that, you just imagine it. So we had the whole gamut. It was very sad to see. The people of South Florida and Naples are kind of like we are in Northeast Tennessee. They're very resilient, they're very stubborn. You probably heard that there was probably about a population of 10,000 or so that stayed on their boats during the hurricane, and we thought we actually lost a third of them because they couldn't find them, but they did end up finding them. So, and this is a picture here of someone that was trying to evacuate the Keys during the storm, and I didn't really get a good picture, but there's a vehicle attached to the front end of this. They were just driving down the road and it blew them over and they left it. So The other thing that was kind of interesting, I don't have a picture of it, was there, you know how we have squirrels and skunks and possums that run out? They have iguanas, big iguanas. And they run, they're like a squirrel. They'd run out and you run over them. We had green stuff coming off from power and stuff. Here's some pictures of fuel. This is a picture of, I'm not really sure, I think we're north of Miami here. Of us, this is all this, and there's more back this way. It's just a mess. And they actually let us get in and get fuel. And the people, I'll tell you what, though, the people in Florida, they were wonderful towards us. When we pulled in and we told them what we were needing, the people, even the people that were fussing and fighting, let us get our fuel, and they knew we were there to help and let us get out. So that was a good thing. Okay, North Carolina, we had a deployment there last year for the nurse strike team. And we have actually three RNs, Faye, Melissa, and Liz, and then a nurse practitioner, Teresa. And they went to work in Lumberton, North Carolina. After the huge flooding issue they had, the whole town was underwater. I think they had, did she say 600, 400? There was hundreds of people in the shelter there. And they were all functional needs. Again, the majority of them should have been in a hospital or a long-term healthcare setting. This is what the shelter looked like. You see they had the cattle gates. The Red Cross shelter had it set up to where they had tables for privacy. I'll tell you one thing, if you ever have to go to shelter, you might as well forget about having privacy because there is none, okay? And so when they set shelters up, they try to find the biggest building they can that has water, power, and air conditioning if possible, and they put as many people as they can in that building, as you can see there. And this, I think they were down there for either 14 days or 12 or 14 days, our nurse strike team, taking care. And they actually had to move this shelter a couple times, so there's a lot of dynamics in that. This is where they slept, looks kind of like what I showed you before, where we were sleeping. They had the little hole back in a corner somewhere where they all could sleep. As y'all well know, we have to take care of animals now too. We after Hurricane Katrina, there was a huge issue because Red Cross and local emergency management really wasn't prepared to take care of animals, like pets, and not just dogs and cats, but like lizards and snakes and parrots and ferrets and whatever you can think of. People come off the plains here in the Tri-Cities during Hurricane Katrina with all these exotic animals from Louisiana. And they had to take care of it. So one of the things that we've learned since then as an emergency management community is we have to prepare for that. So here on site, not inside the building, but on site, there was an actual kennel operation going. So people had their pets close to them, and they had to take care of the pets too. So there you have another set of issues. So you have to have veterinarians and vet techs and people like that. And you can see that's who's here. They're taking care of the animals and making sure they're safe and not stressed out. In 2009, I was able to deploy to Kentucky during the ice storm in western Kentucky. And this was one of the worst ice storms in probably about we call a 100-year event, which is just meaning that it's probably hadn't happened in 100 years. And so it had total devastation for the western part of Kentucky. The western part of Kentucky was cut off as far as communication goes from the eastern part. They were without power for weeks and months in some cases. And our mission here was to go into the western part and help in the emergency operations centers and to help people kind of get back on their feet. This is a picture here of people lining up for propane. Some of the things that you can always bank on during a disaster, people want food and fuel, and a lot of times there's not enough of either. So that's kind of the picture there. We were there I think I was there for about 12 days. Worked in an emergency operations center in Lyon County, Kentucky. Lyon County is a county about the size of Hancock County, very poor county, and people there endured a lot during that ice storm. So we learned a lot from that. And then in 2011, while I was working for emergency management here in Washington County, in April we had a very unusual tornado event that took place in April of that year. People don't really remember this part of it because this is kind of what started it. We all remember later on in the month. But on April the 9th, we had a tornado. We had actually two tornadoes, I think, that touched down outside of Jonesboro on the 9th. And this is a picture. This is another cool thing that comes with the job. You get to go and fly in helicopters and take pictures and stuff. So we called Wings Air Rescue and asked them if they'd do a training mission for us. And after the tornado, so we could take some pictures for damage assessment. And this is outside of Jonesboro off of Headtown Road. And this is actually Mayor Eldridge's farm. That was ground zero for the touchdown. It touched down in his farm. And this is Johnson City right here. So it went, you can see where it went through there and did a lot of damage to his farm. But luckily, on that day, luckily we didn't have any deaths. We had a lot of damage, and not any injuries. We had a lot of damage. And very weak tornado, 90 mile per hour, EF1, but it was 3 miles in length, 150 yards wide. It's very, very interesting. We work very closely with the National Weather Service also. As a matter of fact, we're going up there Friday for kind of a meet and greet with them in Morristown. It's very interesting to watch the meteorologists from the National Weather Service do their damage assessment on these tornadoes. This is that same day, and it's actually, I would consider it the same tornado, but that it touched down outside of Jonesboro, it lifted up, and then it come into Johnson City, where the VA's at over here with the cemetery, and it touched down on top of these buildings. Now, these buildings burnt down a few years ago, so they're not there now, but it did tremendous damage to those buildings. It did a lot of damage to the cemetery. It tore down, or knocked down a bunch of trees. Bless you.
Sorry.
And we had a lot of damage there. So, and the reason I'm showing you this, all this stuff, or all these incidents, is because we try to get people to understand that we are susceptible to many different types of disasters here in Northeast Tennessee. And it's all comes to a point here in a little bit. So on April 27th, this was the huge tornado outbreak. This was like a 500-year event for the United States. We had a very, very severe line of storms that started in Mississippi, Louisiana area, and had long track tornadoes with supercell thunderstorms on this day. They started in Alabama area and then moved up through our area around 9 o'clock on that same night. We had 3 tornadoes here in our area and within Washington County. We had 2 EF3s. These are unheard of around here, absolutely unheard of, 150 to 160 mile per hour winds. And we had a smaller or weaker tornado in the Fall Branch area. Johnson County also had a very similar tornado that touched down up there. We lost, I think, 10 people that day in Northeast Tennessee. When I say lost, they died. Majority of all of them were in mobile homes. The mobile homes were directly struck by the tornado, and they died in their homes. So one of the misconceptions about tornadic activity in mountainous areas is that they cannot happen, and that tornadoes bounce off the mountains, and that's farthest from the truth. We had proof of that in April 2011. Actually enhances the tornadoes and then enhances the winds. We had a fire truck in the Chuckey area of Washington County that was moved over 100 feet by one of these tornadoes here, and did a lot of damage to the truck. Actually, it looked like if you've ever seen someone sandblast something, it looked like it sandblasted the truck. With rocks and stuff, it had a lot of damage to it. With the firemen were actually hunkered down inside the fire truck. They actually were on a propane gas leak where a tree or something fell in a tank because of the winds. And when they were there trying to take care of that, the tornado come through. They had to jump back in the truck and hunker down. And try to move the truck. And the fire truck, weighs 40 to 50,000 pounds. That's a lot of weight from 100 feet. And then, so this was the morning, believe it or not, you always see on TV, the morning after, the day after, I will always remember the storms that night. They're the most horrific storms I've ever experienced in my life. And I've been in Florida and other places with thunderstorms. These were just horrific lightning, wind, tornadoes. This was the day after. Beautiful, beautiful, like most of us are, accustomed to here in Northeast Tennessee. But you can see here the destruction, and this was in the Chuckey community, which is the south central community of Washington County. And you can see the destruction of, these are these three outline pictures are mobile homes. This is an actual a stick-built home that were destroyed by the tornado. And I can't remember which one of these was also one of the trailers where we lost someone. We had one death in Washington County. There was one death in Washington County, 2 in Johnson, and that would leave 6 in Spring to make 10. One of the things though that we do, notice in Tennessee as a whole, and even in the Southeast, is we were a very resilient group of people. The responders are, and so is the community. And these are some pictures of the first responders that responded. We probably had 400 or 500 people that responded to this incident that affected Washington County, Greene County, Sullivan County, Johnson County. Also affected Unicoi and Carter a little bit, but didn't have the damage that we did over here. And so we had a lot of support from a lot of our state partners, THP. The picture here, if you're ever interested in volunteering, and Kathleen can talk about here in a minute, those 2 folks are with what we call the Fire Corps, Limestone Fire Corps, which is also a part of the Citizens Corps program or the Medical Reserve Corps. They spent 2 weeks with us, fed us, made sure that they helped us laugh. Wonderful people, kept us going, kept us positive about everything, even though we had a lot of bad things going on. So we also had to set up a food distribution. It was kind of like a little hardware grocery store type thing. People would bring donations in, and you can see there's everything from food, blankets to dog food, cat food, chainsaw. You see here chainsaw oil. We had to have a lot of that so people cut the trees down. Just a huge response. And then in 2012, it was a Sunday evening. It was August the 5th, 2012, I think. It was on Sunday, and I was sitting at home with family, having a meal with some family that was out of town, and it was raining really hard here in Johnson City. But where I was at in Johnson City, it wasn't raining as bad as it was here in Dry Creek. And my boss was actually, at that time, he was in Hawaii visiting his family, and his daughter lived over here off of Greenwood Drive, and she called him and said, "Hey, we're having some major flooding." So he called me and asked me, "Hey, Chad, what's going on?" I said, "I'm just having supper." He said, "Is it raining there?" I said, "Yeah, it's raining." He said, "Is it flooding at your place?" Of course, I lived on a hill. I said, "Well, it ain't flooding here. It's just raining a little bit." And he said, "Susan's place is flooding." And I said, "Oh," so I called over the dispatch, and it was flooding. This is Dry Creek. This is kind of southern Washington County going towards Irwin. The National Weather Service estimated that we had a thunderstorm cell that dropped 6 inches of rain within 30 minutes on this area. Myself and Ness, my boss at the time, we sat down one day and was trying to figure out how many gallons that is. 1 square mile, 1 inch for 1 square mile, 1 inch of rain for 1 square mile is 17 million gallons of water. So we had 6 inches in 30 minutes on top of what we call Buffalo Mountain here behind us. It was kind of bordering Unicoi and Carter in Washington County, where you're familiar with the fire tower area. And it caused a very large landslide. They were doing some logging up there in that area near the Christian camp, which had to shut down eventually because of the damages. And it caused a mudslide, and the rain came down, and this is called Dry Creek Road, and the creek runs right over here, and it's usually fairly dry. That's why they call it Dry Creek. It doesn't ever get very high, except for this night that it actually did flood. And this home here, I remember driving down to the area that night about 6 o'clock. I had my radio on, and I heard fire department EMS on the radio talking about a house in the middle of the road. Well, I thought it was like a mobile home or outbuilding or something like that. This was all covered with water. So if you would think about water up to about here, maybe in this area, and we actually had some EMS personnel that were brave enough to put in a boat in this area to try to rescue the person that was in this house who was still in it when it floated away. And they actually got tangled up, and there's a bunch of trees all over here. They got tangled up and fell out of the boat. We both lost them. So it was horrible. I didn't go down to the next morning when the floodwaters had receded, and I thought, oh my gosh, this was an actual home on a foundation. It actually moved it about 200 feet, maybe a little bit further, maybe 300 feet in that direction. The only thing that stopped it from going across the road and wiping out dozens of trailers was that car. Of course, the guy that lived in it was in it when it floated away. So, very, very bad. And this whole community was devastated. So this kind of gets into public health implications. Very poor, poverty level in this part of the county is very, very high. Literacy is very, very high. Literacy rates are very high, or illiteracy. The homes were most all mobile homes, double wides and single wides. So they were all pretty much destroyed, because if you figure if water got up this high in this house, when the water gets up to the bottom of a mobile home, it pretty much destroys it because it wicks the water up into the walls. We had septic tanks that were overflowing with sewage. We had mosquito issues with mosquitoes. We had sharp objects. Imagine all the debris. We had it was just a mess. It's just one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. And we were down there for about 2 weeks. The recovery effort took years. And we found out that it's very important to have a long-term recovery system. And with all the homes that were destroyed in this community were rebuilt by Appalachia Service Project. If you've never heard of them and you're looking for a mission or a volunteer opportunity to reach out to the community, not only in Northeast Tennessee or the South, but anywhere in the United States, Appalachia Service Project is a very good organization. They're a nonprofit, and their mission is to typically remodel homes to make have a better standard of living for people. After this disaster, they kind of shifted their focus, and were building new homes for people that didn't have homes. And we weren't putting people back in single wide trailers so that the flood could come through and destroy them again. We put them back in a stick-built home that was built. They did a lot of research and calculations, and they built them higher off the ground and built with flood devices where the water would flow through instead of push the house and things like that. So we see a lot of things like this. We responded there to help with consulting with environmental issues like contaminated water, sewage infested water, mosquito infestation, contaminated gardens, because people didn't have any food to eat, and in this area they really depend on their gardens to live. We also had this small business owner who, this is a horse farm. He had miniature horses here, and I think he lost 12 or 13 of his horses, destroyed his house, destroyed all of his cars, his trailers, his barns, and half of his livelihood. So there was always a lot at stake, very, very large impact. So in 2014, we had our what we call the Ebola outbreak or Ebola scare. Of course, the outbreak took place in Western Africa, Nigeria, and those areas around there. And we started seeing a lot of concern in our community with travelers, because we know a lot of students that go to school here live or visit in that area back and forth and come to school here. We have travelers on mission trips at that time that were going back and forth to Africa. And we remember that we did have some we had some people that came back to the United States that contaminated some of our medical professionals in Texas and other areas of the country. And we had a lot of issues there. So what our main focus on at this time was to gather our hospital coalitions together, Mountain States and Wilmot, and our public health agency or county health departments and our regional office. And we began a series of tabletop exercises with our response partners and to discuss about how we would handle an outbreak of a highly infectious disease here in Northeast Tennessee. And this was about a year-long process. It started, of course, we're unfortunately in most cases with some of the stuff we're very reactionary or reaction driven versus being proactive. And now we're, especially with highly infectious disease, that we've seen what Ebola could do to places in South or in West Africa and in other parts of Africa that don't have the public health infrastructure that we have here. We do have a very robust system in place now in the United States, and especially in Tennessee, for highly infectious diseases. So we held a series of tabletop exercises with our hospital partners, where we had scenarios to where what would we do if we had someone that came into Northeast Tennessee that had been exposed to Ebola virus while they were in Africa, and they were actually became symptomatic while they're here. What would we do? We walked through the whole process. We took a lot of what we learned from Emory and from the other Ebola hospitals around the country, and put that into practice here in the United States and in Tennessee. We also were very concerned because a lot of our county health departments provide primary care, and we were concerned that we were concerned that someone could walk in that may had traveled to another country, and this was also the time we were seeing SARS and some other respiratory illnesses coming out of the Middle East and Africa also, and also we're seeing malaria and some other things. So not only we were worried about Ebola virus, but we were worried about other things. So we actually did functional walkthroughs with all of our county health departments and make sure that they followed the protocol. And if you still go to the doctor today, I know at least they ask me they still ask the question, have you been out of the country in the past 30 days? And that's still practice. This is actually a student intern that we had at the time. She graduated from the College of Public Health, Amanda Hurley, and she was our intern for a semester, and she was our Ebola patient, and she went into all of our county health departments and played the role of that, and we kind of went through the scenario with them, all our county health departments, to be able to teach them how to react for a highly infectious disease. And this is our nurse supervisor there who's contacting Dr. Kursky to let them know what's going on. They put her in an isolation room, so we did this huge plan, and we still have it in place to where if we have someone that has a highly infectious disease, they'll put them in every facility has an isolation area where you can put the person. And then in this case, we actually had EMS that come in and actually transported her to the local hospital in Unicoi. And then you can see her sitting here in the hospital room, in the emergency room. And we learned a lot from this. We learned a lot from a public health standpoint about personal protective equipment. We also learned a lot about what not to do. When Amanda was here in the ER in the emergency room there, or in the trauma area where they had it. This was their area to where they were going to put high infectious disease patients. They kind of left her in there and forgot about her. So we learned a lot about communicating. It's all about the stigma of the disease, of the virus, or the illness. So it's a very interesting process. We did have a lot of good PPE training that we sent people to, Elizabeth, our Griffin Foundation, and a lot of the best practices, the CDC and from Emory and Nebraska and some of the other hospitals that had patients. We learned a lot from those folks, and we still use this today. So one of the other programs that we have that we plan for every year, and this is kind of the backbone of our response, is the Strategic National Stockpile. And this program supports our pulling and dispensing site. So I talked briefly earlier about pulling and dispensing, and we have a very large program here in Tennessee where we have pre-designated sites in every county. Some counties have up to two, and it's based on population. And we have to figure out how many hundreds of thousands of people can we provide prophylaxis for X event. So if we have we're to have a bad flu season, and we had a pandemic flu outbreak, kind of like H1N1 almost was in 2009, we can set up a point of dispensing clinic, provide antivirals or flu vaccines if that's the case. If we have a bioterrorism incident involving anthrax release or nerve agent or organophosphate of some sort, we do have the nerve agent antidote kits here in the region and strategically placed for use for EMS and hospital. We would also request through the CDC the stockpile, which is not only a cache of what you see here, antibiotics, vaccines, antitoxins, and chemical antidotes, but it also provides field hospital support, it provides a lot of medical equipment and personnel, which would probably come in the form of U.S. Public Health Service doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. We call it a 12-hour push pack, and this is just a part of that, a picture of that. It's actually, unless they've condensed it down some, it's actually a push pack consists of 8 tractor trailer loads of 51-foot reefer trailers of stuff, whatever you need. So what we would do in an incident here in Tennessee is we do have Tennessee does have a managed inventory stockpile at a location in Kentucky. We would start off with that, and then depending on the severity and whatever the agent is, whatever we determine it to be, would be how we would respond. And so we would either respond, we would respond accordingly depending on what we were dealing with. So we might use ours first, and we may need to augment our cache with the SNS cache. So the SNS again includes the nerve agent antidote kits, which we have here in the region, and then they have all kinds of other medicines. The main thing we're really focused on right now is anthrax, because that's probably the most credible thing that we could see day to day in the United States. We saw a huge issue after 9/11 with white powder incidents. A lot of them were real, and a lot of people did die because they were sent. A lot of them were politicians and just people that were collateral damage, unfortunately, that received the letters in the mail that had spores. So we do take that very seriously. And if you can think of just the most crazy, like a Walking Dead incident, that's what we're kind of preparing for. It's one of those things to where someone has disseminated some type of bioterrorist agent in a weaponized form, and we're trying to catch up, figure out what it is, and how to treat the people that are contaminated. A good, if you're really interested in bioterrorism, a good case study is an incident that took place in the late 70s in Sverdlovsk in Russia. And there was a laboratory over there that they were playing around with weaponized anthrax, and somehow or another it got into the ventilation system, and they didn't have a filter in, and it actually left the building, it covered the town, and then people died. It's very bad. You inhale anthrax spores. So
how are they just playing around with anthrax?
Well, it's Russia,
Hey, catch this.
Yeah. So that was bad. But if you're interested in really in bioterrorism, that's a good case study. It's called Preparedness. I guess too, on a side note, we do have a civilian training facility in the United States. It's in Anniston, Alabama. It's called Center for Domestic Preparedness, and they do have live nerve agent, VX, GD. They do have anthrax. They have anything you think of there. And it's for civilian training. I have been there. Anybody that is in a civilian public safety role, so it's fire, EMS, law enforcement, public health, hospital, whatever, we can go there free of charge and go play with nerve agent. It's pretty cool. So, it's that's something if you're interested in. It's free of charge. Become a medical reserve corps volunteer, and then you can go play nerve agent. All right. Regional Healthcare Coalition. So Tony Wright is our regional hospital coordinator. Tony is he has a background in logistics, very knowledgeable about that, and he served our country in the Army National Guard. He's actually retiring in the spring, so he's got a lot of life experience and knowledge, and is doing a great job with the hospital preparedness program. There's so much with this. So his position is totally funded through ASPR, Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. He and a collaborator from Sullivan County, Miranda Belcher, who's also a graduate from here in epidemiology, right? Work together at the Healthcare Coalition. The Healthcare Coalition consists of all these hospitals located throughout Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. And they meet regularly. They receive grant funding through ASPR to provide provide emergency preparedness services to the community to help maintain a robust emergency preparedness system within the hospital. So we have, I think our big thing with the Healthcare Coalition, again, is collaboration and networking. We also do exercises all year long. I mean, every year we're doing some type of exercise or training. And we have to practice surge on the EDs yearly, and we have to practice our ChemPACs, a sustainment program. We also have to look at things like happened in Florida. If you all remember, with Hurricane Irma, we had a nursing home in Florida where I think ended up maybe 10 people died. That didn't need to happen. That was very bad. That's one of the things that we're addressing right now. We've not ever had that happen in Tennessee that I know of, and we don't ever want it to happen in Tennessee. And that's one of the things that Tony and Miranda's working on right now is a crisis standard of care. I would have thought that after Hurricane Katrina, if y'all read the book or heard about the hospitals down, a couple of hospitals there in Louisiana and New Orleans, to where they pretty much had to let people die and kind of triage within the hospital, which has got to be horrible for a doctor and nurses to do. We've had to develop a crisis standard of care to determine at what level can we support someone's life in a major incident that's where a hospital's been damaged to the point where we don't have staff or the resources to keep them alive. So we're working very closely with our long-term health care. And just recently, well, this has been going on for a couple of years now, any long-term healthcare provider that receives Medicare funding, they have to participate in a community emergency training and exercise program, and they really need to participate in the local healthcare coalition. Every state, to some degree, has the same program. They have FET, what we call Public Health Emergency Preparedness, and they have hospital preparedness. However, every state does it differently, and they don't fund it totally. And Tennessee, I have to say, is probably one of the more proactive states that we fund to a high level, and we really take this seriously. So he's really busy with training and exercises, and then he does a lot. He's been doing a lot with amateur radio. I don't know if anyone here is an amateur radio operator or is interested in that, but we do use amateur radio operators as a kind of redundant form of interoperable communication. So he works very closely with them to make sure that when everything else goes down, our cell phones and our text messaging and our email, that we can still communicate. We have a lot of technology and situational awareness types of programs. So we have a thing called TENHON, Tennessee Health Alert Network, and that's how we alert. It's a very robust system. That's how we alert our public health staff to respond back for a point of dispensing call, or if we have a natural disaster, or if we just need to get information out. This system also alerts local hospital systems, and we also can alert a large portion of our medical community, so private practice doctors and things like that. We can alert them about things that are going on. There's also a system that we use, the hospital resource tracking system, and it's used in disasters to provide up-to-date bed counts so we can get people to the right level of care. We can see bed counts, we can see services that are provided, so we can make sure if someone has a certain injury or illness that they can get to the proper hospital that can provide that level of care. So again, he's very busy, very busy in this program, and this is a very good program if you're ever interested in seeing what they do at a meeting. You're welcome to come to one of our meetings and listen in and hear, because we have very good participation. This is some pictures. I mentioned Anniston, or Center for Domestic Preparedness, a little bit ago. These are some pictures from Anniston, where our healthcare coalition went a couple of years ago to a hospital emergency response training, where they were taught on how to do a mass decontamination during a hazardous materials incident. I don't know if you all saw here about a month ago in Rogersville. Somebody walked into the Rural Health Consortium. It was the ETSU Rural Health Consortium up there. And he'd been, we thought at first it might be meth or fentanyl, but he ended up, I think, being someone mixing cleaning solution, kind of like ammonia with chlorine, something like that. He was doing something at home. He mixed some chemicals, went to the rural health clinic, and contaminated the nurse practitioner and the nurse, and they ended up having to transport like 20 people to that little hospital in Rogersville, and they had to decontaminate everybody. So this program, through the Healthcare Coalition, the decon team for the hospital systems went and they received training, and then they came back and with their grant funding, they purchased decontamination equipment that could be moved to a hospital in case there's a hazardous material spill and people have to be decontaminated. They also used their money to buy a generator and generator support trailer. Every hospital in the area has generator power. However, some of the smaller ones may not be as large as they need to be. And they're slowly upgrading those, like the medical center or Franklin Woods. They have huge generators that are as big as this room that can keep the hospitals going when the power's out. But we also know that we need to provide support to our long-term health care, dialysis centers, and other healthcare providers, as well as our hospital systems. So they purchase this and they move it when needed when there's power outages. And then this is an example of the mass decon training that you would see at Anniston. These folks here are wearing a level B suit with what we call a PAPR, purified air respirator system. It's not really a positive pressure, just a little bit of positive pressure to keep stuff out, but it's a little more protection than an N95 mask. And the whole goal with the training is to get as many people through the decon line as you can. 2010, while I was working with emergency management, we got a grant. Emergency management got a hazmat grant through TEMA to have an exercise. So we partnered with the Department of Public Health, and that's probably the first time I had any interaction with the Department of Public Health and Public Health Emergency Preparedness. My predecessor, Shirley Hughes, and we did a combination bioterrorist incident. So we did had a scenario at the fairgrounds. We used volunteers from Medical Reserve Corps. I know we had a lot of College of Public Health, a lot of nursing students that acted as players or victims. And we did a scenario where we had a release of a nerve agent via a dust crofting plane. And we had to transport X number of people to different hospitals. We also had to transport the chem pack to different locations throughout the region. So we tested our plan and it worked out real well. You can see we had the helicopter on hand. Part of the plan is to move the chem pack via ground and via air. And one of our goals is within an hour of a request of the chem pack assets, they have to be there. So we actually moved the assets to Greenville within an hour, and also had to fly. It had to fly, and it's a huge dynamic because these medevacs. If you've never been in one, they're just tight. There's three people in them. There's two. There's usually a flight medic and a flight nurse, and the pilot. And if you got a body in there, then it's tight. So we had to really practice the weight distribution because you can only put so much weight on these helicopters because they're very dependent on that. So we tested our plan and it worked out real well. And we learned a lot of things. You can see that it was inclement weather that day. It's very foggy, so we did have some issues with the helicopter with low visibility and things like that. But again, this is an example of what we do. It makes for interesting discussion sometimes. And then our point is things and programs. So we have some different types of pods. So we have open pod. What an open pod consists of, it's a community pod or it's a public pod. So we would expect if we needed to provide antibiotics or medications or antivirals or vaccines, we would expect the general public to come to these point of dispensing clinics. We also, we have closed pods. And what those are is they are similar to open pod, however, they are more like a private or maybe a government partnership with local school systems, local first responders, local universities, local hospital systems, long-term health care, detention centers, penitentiaries, places like that, to where, let's say for instance, we had an incident here at ETSU, heaven forbid, and we had an anthrax release, and we had people that were exposed. We would provide ETSU with a certain dosage of the antibiotics that would be used to treat that, and then it would be dispensed on campus by ETSU staff. The same holds true for many of the other closed pods. The closed pod would come to the open pod, get the medications, and take it back to their workforce. So that's what a closed pod is. And we have to practice yearly. We have to practice opening our pod sites up and communicating with our staff. Our pod staff is totally dependent on our public health workforce here in the Northeast region, volunteers to the Medical Reserve Corps, and anyone else we can get. There are federal and state laws in place that if we did need to use other state employees for point of dispensing, there is a state law in place to where that the governor can trigger that, and that can happen. So we probably are going to be pretty good on that, but we never have enough people to do what we need, and we're never going to, because it's just we're planning for large scale disasters. We have some other things going on that Melissa's very passionate about. We're passionate about children in disasters, so this is our daycare facilities and youth and homeless, human health and services, providing emergency disaster planning for our children in the school systems and in our daycares. So she very frequently meets with the Health and Human Services Department for licensure of daycare facilities. We do training with the daycare directors. We also have what is now, I need to change terminology, is turned into a disaster mental health coalition, and we partner with Frontier Health, Mountain States, Wilmot, and private practitioners and volunteers to plan to provide mental health services during a disaster. Frontier Health already does this along with other partnerships, but as far as a public health role in that, we kind of pulled in the first responder part of it, because we know that we know there's a gap there. Those of us that worked in the first responder community for years. So we have a really good training. It's an 8-hour adult mental health first aid. It's kind of like you go take CPR and first aid. This is kind of along those same lines. We provide 8 hours of instruction on mental health issues, mental health diagnose. We don't talk about how to diagnose somebody, but we talk about the various mental health illnesses such as bipolar disorder, PTSD, suicide prevention, and things like that. So it's a very good program. If anyone's ever interested in having a class, or even, I don't know if that's something they do here at ETSU, but we'd be very interested in doing that. Mental health first aid for our university students. We also have a emergency preparedness program that Melissa is using called the Readies, and it's basically used to meet the gap that we have for functional access need residents, and those are people that are elderly and or may not be elderly. Most of them are elderly, and they use some type of medical device or medical equipment, or dependent on some type of medical procedure like dialysis or medication and things like that. And it's our program that she does with assisted living, civic organization, churches, and nonprofits to get the word out about how important it is to be prepared for disaster when it strikes. And she's also our nurse strike team leader. So our nurse strike team, any of our nurses in our public health nurses can be on the nurse strike team, and we have some awesome public health nurses. Some of them, as soon as they came out of nursing school, they went into public health, and then a lot of them also worked in critical care also. So we have a very good system there. These are some pictures or examples of what point dispensing looks like. So your left picture is what we would consider a open pod. This picture here, what we call a drive-through pod. So if we Want to maximize our throughput and not have people get out of their cars. Then we can set up a drive-through pod. You can do a flu clinic through a drive-through. It just depends on how you set it up, but that's a couple different models. And there's some other pictures and signage and just different looks of what a pod looks like. And that's children disasters. We work very closely providing them services. All right. Did anyone have any questions or anything for me? I'm gonna turn it over to Kathleen and let her talk about the Medical Reserve Corps.
Hey guys, so like Dr. Beatty and Chad said, I graduated from here in May with my master's in Epi and did my internship at Sullivan County with Mark Moody in their emergency preparedness department. And so yeah, I was definitely in your shoes not long ago, and I remember when Chad came and talked to our class, that was the first time I'd heard about emergency preparedness in the health department, and I thought it was just really cool and fascinating and a lot of stuff I didn't know, so I'm fortunate and happy to be working in it now, so that all worked out for me. So I am the Medical Reserve Corps Volunteer Coordinator, and the Medical Reserve Corps, it started after 9/11. So we had, after 9/11, they had all these people show up on the scene wanting to volunteer and help out, but nobody knew who they were, didn't know if they were who they said they were. You know, they didn't know if they really held the medical license they said they did. So the Medical Reserve Corps was established, and it's a all volunteer group. So it's a national network of volunteers, but they're all organized locally. So in the Northeast region, I have all the 7 counties in the Northeast region besides Sullivan County. So since they're a metro, they have their own MRC unit. And their volunteer coordinator is also a graduate of the NPH EPI program. Yay, no EPI. But so what we do is in the Medical Reserve Corps, we use both medical and non-medical volunteers. So the name's a little bit misleading, but I'd say, so for the volunteers that we have in the Northeast region, we have about 2 non-medical volunteers for each medical volunteer that we have, and everybody plays an important role. So of course, volunteers, you know, you'd be asked to help out if there were a real emergency or disaster. You might go help out with the point of dispensing clinics like Chad was just showing you, and what we do, like we would do a just-in-time training, and then volunteers would help with things like checking in patients or patient flow and communications and dispensing medicines and discharge and stuff like that. And so throughout the year when we don't have emergencies, volunteers will help out with the exercises and drills, like Chad showed you the hospital exercises. That's a great one that students really like. So like every year the hospitals do a full-scale exercise. And so you get painted up as victims and patients, and I know earlier this year, so this hospital exercise, I got to see some students go be evacuated from the hospital on the med sled. So I went downstairs in the sled, and that was kind of cool. They enjoyed that. So there's a lot of great opportunities as a student for volunteering, and it just really, like Chad said, it helps us both out. I mean, it helps us out to build up our volunteer database, and you know, just to know that we have volunteers if should we ever need them. But it helps you guys. I really believe this. So it helps you guys because for me, like volunteering and helping out when I was a student really opened my eyes to just the vast world that is public health. I mean, it's, you know, you learn a lot studying in the classroom, and it's great, but to have different opportunities to get out here and just really kind of apply what you learn. When I was a student, I volunteered with the Sullivan County. This was before I interned with them. I did the CASPER, where they go door to door and do emergency response assessment, and so that was a great opportunity. So yeah, I just think the Medical Reserve Corps is a great way to get kind of your foot in the door and get some experience. So to sign up, it's super easy. It's online. I'll pass out some brochures with all the sign up information. It's tnmrc.org. You go in, you sign up, put in all your information, and then I'll do a background check, and So it's, if you have a medical license, you sign up on the medical side. If not, you're non-medical. And so if somebody signs up on the medical side, like I'll verify their license with the state. And so, you know, we make sure everyone's who they say they are. But I guess just aside from that, like, yes, like MRC's great, but also just, I don't know, I feel like I have the chance to talk to you guys about like being a student. I would just, I don't know, advice that I have, I guess,
I
like,
was gonna ask you to give.
yeah,
What advice do you? I wrote it down.
Okay,
For your
yes,
students.
definitely, I would just say be open. Like, I know when I started out, like, I didn't know what I really wanted to do, and I was in epi, and I just thought, oh, I mean, I don't know, it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot you have to figure out, but just be open. Like I said, like I wasn't a GA, so I didn't really have that in, but I volunteered with the research team, and I strongly encourage that. Like, you just volunteer, just get out there, ask. You know, you've got all these great instructors that this is your time to ask them questions. Just know, what did they learn? What do they recommend? And see kind of who you work well with, and kind of get involved with projects that they have going on. And so yeah, definitely do that. Be open. I never, like I said, starting out, I didn't know anything about emergency preparedness. I didn't know that I would, fall in love with it and become passionate about it. Also never saw myself being interested in mosquito-borne illnesses, but that is definitely something that I don't know, it was with the research group I was in, and then I did the Interprofessional Global Health course in Nicaragua, which I also recommend. If you can do that class, that's awesome. And yeah, so I just let everything kind of take me where, it led me, and I was really fortunate to get in at Sullivan County. Your internships, take them seriously. I would say put in some thought to where you're applying and where you want to do your internship, and ask around, like ask, second year students where they think they might do theirs, or anybody that you can ask me anything you want. I had a really great experience. I had a preceptor who was very encouraging. He didn't pigeonhole me into just like one project, which is one thing that I would highly suggest. Like, if you can get into the health department somewhere and work with someone who will let you explore your interests, that's a great time to do that. So, let's see, what else?
Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah. Anything MRC related or MPH program related?
Going back to the internship, I get a lot of students that are getting ready to do the internship, and they have no idea what they want to do. So just be very focused at this point in your academic career. And if you do have to do an internship, I encourage you just to really come to your preceptor with an idea, because it's really hard for me. I've had some really awesome interns, and I've had a couple that weren't so good because they were just trying to get through the process instead of putting themselves out there. So
Yeah.
it makes it go a lot quicker
And I mean,
and easier.
yes,
Makes it
and you
fun.
can sure you can like approach your project as you're getting through the process, you're gonna check boxes off and graduate, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you take that route. It's a great time to learn, and pick a project, find something you've always kind of been interested in, and build on that.
Yeah. I don't know if any of you knew Yemi.
He's now in the DC metro area. He's
For
one of our health admin students.
he's a doctoral student
He's
up there?
doing some pre-doctoral research.
Pre-doctoral,
right
okay. So Yemi is from Nigeria, okay. I had Yemi 2 semesters ago, yes. And he's a doctor from Nigeria, a medical doctor there, and I guess my point is the students that are from that part of the world where the public health system is not as robust as it is here. He's very passionate about coming here to the United States, learning as much as he can about public health, and going back home, because he worked during the Ebola virus disease outbreak there, and saw the devastation that was there, and saw what their public health infrastructure, how poor it was. So, and some of you, I'm sure some of you may be from that same part of the world. So, we're very glad to have you with us, and we're glad that you're passionate. Everyone's passionate, but the Yemi people like Yemi, students like Yemi are ones that I really kind of inspire me, because we take so much for granted here in the United States because of what we have. And there's another young lady that's interning over at Washington County. I can't think of her, Vanessa. She's from Haiti.
Yeah.
Do you know her last name?
Matherin?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is she?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's undergrad in health education, and she is another good example of students that come from HCSU. She actually wanted to come over. She's doing her internship in health education over there at Washington County Health Department. But she heard about emergency preparedness and wanted to come over and talk with me, Kathleen, and Melissa and Tony. And she was very concerned about her country, because Haiti 4 or 5 years ago had that huge earthquake. And when we found out that she was from Haiti, we kind of asked, well, how are things going? Is it back to normal? She's like, it'll never be back to normal. She said it wasn't normal when it was good, and it's never going to be normal again. So thinking about the folks that live in Puerto Rico, that are in Puerto Rico right now, or even the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Croix, and all that, total devastation. And we're talking about, it just blows my mind to know that Haiti 4 or 5 years ago had that huge earthquake, and she's like, no, it's horrible, and it's never going to be better. It's just so those of us that born here, live here, take for granted the blessings that we have, and those of you that don't have that in your wherever you hail from. So
another couple of quick things. So back to the internship. I don't know. And other programs and stuff that I've done, my bachelor's and everything, somebody told me one time, like, think of it as like a semester-long job interview, and that will, that's what you need to keep in mind. Like, don't phone it in, and show up every day, do what you can, because they're gonna notice that, and the public health world, people talk. So
especially in a centralized system like ours. So we have students who will do their internships in this region, but go on and get jobs across the state or in the central office, and they take, a recommendation from a faculty member, sure, but if the person who is their preceptor within the system will give them a good recommendation, that has a lot of weight. Because they trust those people that they won't,
Yeah, we
tell
we
them
employ
anything that's not true.
Yeah, we've employed many students, either undergrads or grad students, and obviously still do.
And I think too, with the volunteering with the MRC and other, just other volunteer opportunities, that is something that will build your resume and give you talking points in job interviews. And that's the kind of stuff you could definitely start doing now. And that, that'll help you out in the long run.
Any other questions? Yes, yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I just wanted to ask, like, if you want to apply, who do you contact and stuff like that? Who do you?
Yeah, for the medical reserve corps.
For the
For
internship.
Internships. We have academic coordinator Katie Cannon.
She'll be graduating
Yeah.
before you guys do. But we have relationships with both the Sullivan and the Northeast region. We have what are called academic health departments, where we have a student whose graduate assistantship is full-time at the Northeast region or Sullivan, and their main job is to help connect students. So she or he will be your point of contact. You can find that information out from our website. I think it's listed who the academic health department coordinators
I
are.
think it is, yeah.
Or you can ask any of the faculty and your advisor, they would know. But that person is like, not quite the gatekeeper, but they help you identify who you're interested in, and then they help.
Yeah, and they kind of tend to know too, like who's looking for what, and they may have a good idea of where they can plug you in.
And you do go through, at least with us, you do go through an interview. You interview with your preceptor. And I'm not turning anyone down yet, but my personally, I wanna know what your life goal is. I wanna know why if you come to Versus Preparedness, I just don't want you to come because you're trying to check a box. I want you to have a passion for it.
Yeah.
And there's people that we've interviewed, no, I'm not interested in that. And I said, that's fine. You know,
Yeah.
but at least they came and interviewed and because a lot of people don't understand what we do and may not be interested in that part of it. But.
And I do think it's okay too, like if you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I would do, like you're gonna have some time to develop that. But if it gets closer and you think, I really don't know, contact some of these people who are preceptors and just ask them, you know, what kind of project would you be looking for from a student, you know, and just kind of, maybe that'll help you get the ball rolling. So don't panic if you don't have some elaborate project idea.
And one more thing about Yemi, so he was a student in our department and his work kind of spurred his research interest, and so we did a paper that was looking at the financing of public health. And he got interested in that topic in part because he was getting exposed to how it looks and the financing of it from his internship and his work at the health department. So our paper is under review right now. So you can make it as much as you want it to be. And we try as advisors to make sure that you do that too, so that it really is an applied field like a master's of public health or even a bachelor's. We're training you guys to be out in the field and work in public health, so this applied piece is just invaluable for you guys when you leave.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of talking about the funding and stuff. One thing I did not realize until I started my internship is, I don't know how many people are EPI, but all the EPIs that are state employees are funded through the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program. So there's that overlap that I didn't even know about that connection. So that's definitely a good thing to know. And if you sign up with the Medical Reserve Corps, and even if you don't, there are some FEMA trainings or Incident Command System trainings that if you can go ahead and do those, get those done, they're all online. Or well, the main ones are online. You do them yourself. Then that's going to look good when you're applying for a job and on your CV and resume, because I guess we require all state employees, health department employees now to have these classes. So if you go ahead and take them and already have them, you're one step ahead of the other applicants. So.
Any other questions? All right, thank you guys for coming. Okay, have a break. I'll come back, and so they can stick around and answer any questions you are afraid to ask in front of everyone.
Oh God.
Pass out? Yeah, you can take breaks. We're at a 10-minute break, Sylvester is gonna be man away.